vivarium update. The silicone is dry and it added water, but the original pump decided not to work. I tested it before using it and then just didn't turn on again after this all dried. I have a different pump in there. I put it in a filter bag so it's not going to get clogged up from all the extra peat moss. I pretty much expected this to happen because of it washing off the background. I'll probably keep the filter in a bag to prevent future clogs. And this filter is actually making some noises, so this one's probably temporary. I don't want to put the cord behind the wall here and then have to get it out again. So I'm just going to have this one run for now to keep the back flowing like this, and then get the moss and liverwort started on the drip wall. Get that started growing in. And then when I'm able to get a new pump, I will put the cord up behind this back wall here. You can see where the water hose goes up there. That's exactly where the electric cord is going to go as well. For now, it's just coming out the front, because that's going to be replaced. And up here, you can see that a lot of the water is actually flowing out the end. That's fine with me, because if I plugged that up, it would be spraying out of these holes, and I don't want that. Right now, the flow is pretty much perfect, so I'm going to leave it as is. If I decide I want harder water pressure later, I can always come up here and plug that up, but I think this is the way I want it to stay. As stuff grows in, sometimes things get clogged up a little bit, so it's nice to have the option of turning up the water pressure a little, but I think this is perfect as is. So for now, I'm going to keep this filter running as long as it can stand, and just use that old filter or old water pump to keep the background wet. And I'm going to get the moss and liverwort started back there. I have a little tub of the moss mixture from Glassbox Tropicals. I've already started some of that over in this other vivarium, and it's just some little gamophytes right now, so you can't really see much, but I'm going to use this anywhere that the water's not directly flowing, because I don't want it to just wash right off. So it's going to start over here along these edges. I'll probably try it in some of these areas that do have a flow, but it's really slow. See what happens. I don't want it to wash off, but if it does wash off, it'll just end up somewhere else in the tank, so not a big deal. And I have some Riccia, which is typically purchased at aquarium stores for growing in aquariums, but it adapts to terrestrial life after an adaptation period. But since this is going to have a flow over it constantly, I think it will adapt quite a bit more easily. I also have this. I'm going to take a small bit of this and plant it in here. There's not a ton of it, but I want to see if I can get it established in here without using the entire clump of it, just in case it doesn't like it in here. I don't really want to kill it off. And then ultimately, I'm going to put this fern in there. This is a filmy fern, which needs high humidity. It's got pretty high humidity in here, but this setup will be better for it once it's established. I'm going to need to get top on it to hold humidity, but I'm going to put that in here somewhere. I don't know exactly where yet. I'm going to have to try it out and see how it likes it. Depending on how wet it wants to be, it'll either be on the back wall or mounted over here. I'm going to get some moss growing on the manzanita as well, but that'll take a little bit longer. So that's what I got so far. Turning out kind of the way I'd hoped so far. Got a lot more work to do. So it's had several hours to settle in, and the water flow at this point is just perfect. Really, really happy with how that turned out. Monstera is trying to get in on the action. I cannot wait for moss to start growing. I think I'm going to start planting it tonight. It's mostly just going to be the mosses, but I do have a philodendron that likes to be really wet, so I think I'm going to plant it in here as well. Should do a little better than the terrarium cup it's in right now. So I'm going to get started on that. I'm working on planting the rickia in there. And this is what I have mine in right now. It's just a bag of water set in a pot. I go in there. Fix them up with my tweezers. Come in here and pick a bare spot. Just kind of lay it in there. So far, things are holding place pretty well. Got a big clump of it this time. I'm gonna put some up there. Rickia kind of grows in little pieces that come apart real easily. So, this clump that I'm holding here is basically just kind of caught on each other. I'm using the tweezers to spread it out a little bit. So each of those pieces will start growing independently. Since it is sticking so well, I'm going to keep seeding it in here. This is the philodendron. It came from an aquarium shop, and the owner had it in a paludarium with the roots growing in even more water than this. So it should like this setup. Got some more rickia caught on there. That's a good spot for it. So I'm going to continue working on this a little bit. Since it's sticking so well despite the flow, I'm going to add more than I originally planned, and then add some of the spores and the other little plant as well. Okay, so I added some of this Plagiomnium affine. I'm gonna have to practice that one. I'm gonna put a little bit over here, a little bit up here, a little over there, some over there. And you can see the rickia all over the backdrop. I'm gonna start with that and see how it does. I haven't added the spores yet, but I'm gonna do that next. And I'm gonna look around at my other plants and see if I have anything else that will do well in the little bit drier patches that are along the edges. It's slightly drier, so I might be able to get some I'm about to say the wrong name. Selaginella, whatever, spike moss, to grow along the edges. I kept wanting to say syngonium, which is this. Which, maybe eventually, but for now I want to just work on the back wall. Once I figure out what I'm doing for the bottom. Probably won't be that one, because I want to take off like crazy, but I do have, the lance leaf would look really nice in here, or possibly rayi. But I'm going to get to work on some of those other plants, and I will show you when I add them. So, I have this terrarium here, which is random cuttings that I tossed together. There's some spike moss down there. The ficus, what is this, ficus pumila? And then this microgramma fern, which does fantastic for me. So it's taken off quite a bit. You can see that stem right there is from the microgramma. Stem down here. This stem is from the microgramma. There's a couple more in there. So this thing is just going bananas in there, and I'm going to take a cutting from it. Let's see. That one is growing upwards for the most part and not doing a lot of leaves, so pulling that one out to encourage it to do something else. Then let's see what I can reach in here. Okay. And I got a few more leaves on that one. I'm gonna just leave it at that. I don't know if these cuttings are going to like the terrarium, because it's a bit more wet than they're used to, but I think if I plant some along the edges, it might do okay. Like over here, it's fairly dry, and then back along that wall. So I think I'm going to put one back there, and then one over here somewhere. So I also have this terrarium, and you can see down there on the bottom, that's liverwort, and it's going crazy in here. That patch is twice the size it was last week. So I'm going to pull a little bit of that out. It's taken me quite a while to get it acclimated, but at the rate it's growing, I think I can afford to take a little pinch of it and put it in the big vivarium now. And I might grab some of that spike moss while I'm at it. And now I also have this fern that is starting to grow along the side here, and there's nowhere good for it to grow this direction, so I'm going to grab those starts and move them as well. You can see how that one is, the frond it's growing on is starting to die back, so I don't know if that one's going to survive. But that one looks pretty good, and I think I can move that one successfully. Okay, now here's the starts I got. They're very small, but I can add more later if these do well. That's all I took of the liverwort. 2 tiny little ferns and a couple tiny little clippings of the Selaginella. How do you guys say that? So I'm just going to add those, see how they do. This is the first time ever for me transplanting from this liverwort sample. So I'm just going to start really small and put it in a couple different settings in here and see how it does. So I think I'm going to put some up along this wood bit. And I haven't really decided where to put the other one yet. But I'm going to put those in and then I'll show you in a second. So I went on the hunt for more plants, and this terrarium is just where I've been tossing stuff, and it's kind of blowing me away. Here's more of that microgramma fern, and it is just going crazy all through here. There's some. This looks like the Peperomia prostrata. I had some really sad pieces of it that I tossed in here. It looks like it's growing. Paulownia ripens. I think it's ripens. Just taking off as expected. And then this fern that I added. But the cool stuff is, look at how crazy this is going. It's a little early to tell, but it's either moss or fern gametophytes. That liverwort is doing fantastic, which makes it the second one I've been able to get started in here. These must have come from tropical plants as hitchhikers, which is exactly what I wanted. That fern didn't, or that moss didn't take off, but that's okay. And we got a lot more gametophytes over here. Not sure what that guy is. More of the Peperomia prostrata. But just everywhere there's gametophytes. So that's looking pretty cool. Gonna have to thin this out pretty soon, but for now I'm just gonna leave it as is and let it keep doing its thing, but that's pretty awesome. Back to the vivarium now. Okay, this is going to be the final planting tonight. Here's what I added. This is spike moss there. And another one down here. It grows so quickly when it's happy, I expect it'll just run right up the wall. Same goes for the microgramma fern. Put that right below the philodendron, kind of hoping it'll just run up past it. I suspect that there'll be a lot of training going on here once things start growing. You can barely see it, but there's one of the fern cuttings. That fern is often called dragon's tail. I don't remember the scientific name for it, but it starts new plants from the tips of the fronds. So I got a couple started that way. There's one of them, and the other one is there, that kind of yellowish leaf at the very tip of it. There's a tiny baby fern. I put one of the microgramma ferns back there. It's kind of a hard to see spot, but if that grows in big and bushy, it'll look good coming around that branch. I put the liverwort there and there, and you can see that powder. That is the moss spore powder from Glassbox Tropicals, and I literally just took a spoonful of the very fine stuff and blew it, just a little puff of breath, and blew it onto the back wall. Based on how I put it in my terrariums, the drier ones, that should work just fine, assuming it doesn't wash right off. But it looks like, so far, everything is staying exactly where I put it. For the larger plants, like the philodendron and microgramma, actually just those, I used little plastic staples. They're dark green, so you can't see them, but those will keep them from falling into the water and drowning while they root. The spike moss, I may need to do something similar, but so far it's staying in place, and I have plenty of that, so I'm okay if it falls in and needs to be replaced. Some of that little, I can't remember if that's a moss or a liverwort or what it is. There's a little bit of it there. Another little bit there, right to the left of the other microgramma cutting. So I currently have 3 microgramma species and none of them are identified. So this one I consider microgramma 1 in my collection because I've had this one for, gosh, at least 5 years. At least. Started out with a little cutting, just a little bit bigger than that one that I bought at a expo for $5, and it has grown to be in this terrarium. 1, 2, 3. I've got it in half a dozen different terrariums now, including one that is a 2-gallon jar that's just full of it. Pretty much nothing else. So that one is really prolific. One of my ideas for this vivarium is to let that fern just kind of go crazy along the edges and then keep the middle mostly moss and liverwort. But we will see how it develops. I'm being pretty flexible on this one. Next, I need to decide what to do with the branch. I want to put something here on top of the cut. It is not secured in place though, so I can still very easily pull it out and use my Dremel to make some adaptations to that, make it less of a clean cut. It just looks so man-made, and I don't want that in here. I had a couple little issues like that over on the smaller twig, but it's not as obvious that that's a cut as that. But this has some pretty cool knots. I don't know what the hell to call those. I have some more of this wood with similar knots on it that I might add, but I don't want to get it too crowded. So there it is for now, and I will of course be adding updates as it grows in. I'm really excited to see what it does. I'll put a grow light on it. It's temporary, I'll switch to something better later, but I want the Brickia to have plenty of light to get it kick-started. I really like the way the water's flowing. So now I'm just going to let it grow for a while, make adjustments as things shift, and try and figure out what to do with the bottom of it. At this point, I think I'm going to have this part back in there be land area, and then have it pool in the front here, and then have some kind of boggy plants along the edges. It's not going to have very deep soil, and I don't want very big plants in here, but that's my general idea for now. So we'll see what I can find that I think will look nice growing in here and go from there.